Like a garden snail leaves a trail behind, a story snail leaves a tail behind. Share our stories and you may find you can tell a story too.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another Snailtails Assembly, where today I am joined by the Snailtails cat, Pythagoras. Now, Pythagoras got his name because when he came to join Snailtails, we noticed that he had one whisker pointing out at about 90 degrees to all of the others. And 90 degrees was a very important angle for a man from ancient Greece known as Pythagoras. So we call our cat after him. And Pythagoras has joined me today to help me tell a story because it's a rather special time of year right now. You might be able to get some clues from the changes we've made to my desk. You can see we've got a Christmas tree, we've got candles, and probably the biggest clue of all, the Advent calendar. That's right, this time of year is known as Advent, and it's a time when we're waiting for something very special to happen. But just because we're waiting doesn't mean we're doing nothing. It's also a time of year when we should be getting ready, both in the mind and in the heart, ready for that special thing. And in this story, you're going to see how Pythagoras wasn't just doing a lot of waiting, but was also showing how he was ready in his heart. This story began when I took Pythagoras to the seaside, which is one of his favourite places to go, isn't it? Yeah, Pythagoras loves doing lots of things at the seaside. Raise your hand if you've ever built a sandcastle at the seaside. Yeah, Pythagoras loves building sandcastles, don't you? Yeah. Raise your hand if you've ever buried a grown-up in the sand at the seaside. Yeah, Pythagoras has buried me in the sand a few times at the seaside. And what would you say is your favourite thing to do at the seaside, Pythagoras? Ice cream! Yeah, he really loves having ice cream. Raise your hand if you like having ice cream. But at this seaside, there was also a donkey ride. A donkey is a small animal, looks a little bit like a horse, but with shorter legs, and it makes this noise. Now when Pythagoras saw the donkey, he wanted to have a go riding on the back of it, and the donkey sign said £2 for a ride. So Pythagoras asked me very nicely for £2, and I gave him that £2. And he went to join the queue for the donkey ride. The thing is, it was a really, really long queue. There must have been about 100 people in that queue. So Pythagoras went to the back of the queue and started waiting. And waiting. And waiting. And waiting. And waiting. And waiting. Until there were only 90 people left in the queue. So Pythagoras kept on waiting. And waiting. And waiting. And waiting. And waiting. And waiting. Until there were only 80 people left in the queue. So Pythagoras kept on waiting. And waiting. And waiting. And waiting. And waiting. And waiting. Until there were only 70 people left in the queue. So Pythagoras kept on waiting. And waiting. And waiting. And waiting. And waiting. And waiting. Until there were only 60 people left in the queue. So Pythagoras kept on waiting. and waiting, and waiting, and waiting, and waiting, and waiting, until there were only 50 people left in the queue. And by now, Pythagoras was so close that he could see a little boy getting lifted up onto the back of the donkey. And that boy got carried by the donkey all the way around the seaside, waving and saying, "Hi, Mum! Hi, Dad!" while Pythagoras kept on waiting. And waiting. And waiting. And waiting. And waiting. And waiting. And waiting. Until there were only 40 people left in the queue. And by now, Pythagoras was so close that he could see a little girl get lifted up onto the back of the donkey. And the little girl was carried all the way around the seaside, waving and saying, "Hi, Mum! Hi, Dad!" while Pythagoras kept on waiting. And waiting. And waiting. And waiting. And waiting. And waiting. And waiting. Until there were only 30 people left in the queue. And by now, Pythagoras was so close he could see a pair of twins getting up onto the back of the donkey. There was a little boy and a little girl, and they both sat on the back of the donkey as they went all the way around the seaside, waving and saying, "Hi, hi, Mum, Mum! Hi, hi, Dad, Dad!" while Pythagoras kept on waiting. And waiting. And waiting. And waiting. And waiting. Your turn. And waiting. And waiting. Well, now there were only 10 people left in the queue, because the last lot had been twins, you see. And so Pythagoras was getting really excited now. Soon he would be the one on the back of the donkey. But just then, Pythagoras spotted a little girl in a pushchair who was sucking on a dummy, like that. And her father was pushing her along as she was pointing at the donkey and going, "Dada, Dada, donkey, donkey." But the dad said to the little girl, "I'm very sorry, Sophie, but look at the size of that queue. It's huge. There must be 100 people in that queue, Sophie. I'm sorry, we don't have time. We need to get back to Grandma's for dinner." Well, when Pythagoras heard that, he decided to do something amazing. He called over to the little girl in the pushchair. "You can have my place, if you like." Well, when she heard that, the little girl was so excited and jumped out of her pushchair to take Pythagoras' space in the queue, saying, "Thank you, thank you, thank you." And very soon, she was on the back of the donkey. Going all the way around the seaside, waving and saying, "Hi, Dad! Hi, Pythagoras!" But of course, Pythagoras had given up his space in the queue. So he had to go all the way to the back of all those people and keep on waiting. And waiting. And waiting. and waiting, and waiting. It was such a long time before Pythagoras was back by the donkey. In fact, by then, it had gone dark in the sky, and there was no one behind Pythagoras now. He was the last person in that queue. But the man who pulled the rope leading the donkey spotted Pythagoras as they came back to the donkey station, and he said, "Here, I remember you, little cat. You were the cat who did a really nice thing for the girl in the pushchair, weren't you? You let her take your space in the queue. So I think I'm going to do something really nice for you. I'm going to let you go on the donkey for free." Pythagoras was so happy. He got to go on the back of the donkey and keep hold of his £2. He went all the way around the seaside, waving and saying, "Hatchet, hatchet." And when he got all the way back round, he still had £2 at the end of the day. So what do you think he wanted to spend that £2 on? Ice cream! That's right, ice cream. Well, I think Pythagoras really deserved his ice cream that day, because even though he had been waiting for a long time, he still did something really nice for that girl, didn't he? Do you think that shows that Pythagoras' heart was in the right place? Remember, Advent isn't just about waiting for something special to happen, it's also about getting your heart really ready, and your mind's ready too. I'm sure you can chat about that some more with your grown-ups today. Right now, though, it only remains for Pythagoras and me to say cheerio, and we hope to hear your story soon. So, cheerio! And we hope to hear your story soon.